Hi friends, you're listening to the Shattered Ceilings podcast with your hosts Stephanie and Adriana. We're here to discuss the importance of mental health from the perspective of two first-generation immigrants. Join in weekly as we dive into important topics such as relationships, parenting, and cultural barriers. Here, we get real and candid as we explore what disrupting the status quo looks like for each of us. Hey guys, welcome to Shattered Ceilings podcast. We are your host, Adriana.
And Stephanie.
And thank you for being with us today on another episode. We want to say a big thank you for all the feedback we got. Your support means so much, and we're just thankful that you guys are listening to us.
Yeah, thanks,
and
guys.
Tuning in. Little quick reminder, we have an anonymous suggestion box on our link tree on our Instagram if you guys want to remain anonymous and kind of share any suggestions or comments. You're more than welcome to anonymously. So with that being said, we are in a classroom today.
Yes.
Not your typical classroom. We are going to learn about something that we haven't learned in school. Many of us are aware of what IQ is. It's a test designed to measure intellectual intelligence. Higher IQs indicate better intellectual abilities. People with higher IQs are more likely to do well academically. But with new research, it has shown that there is a better predictor of success, and that is emotional intelligence. Do you want to talk more about that?
Yes, I do. I'm really excited about today's topic. It's something that I'm fairly new with. I think Adriana as well.
Yeah, we're learning.
Yes, learning. It's very, very important. That's why I'm excited that we're talking about it. So I'm sure that we've all heard the same narrative growing up in school, like preached, basically yelled at us that how well you do in school is how well you're going to do in life. Not only at school, but also at home, I think. Academics, like we talked about in the last episode, were like very important to a lot of our parents. But I don't think that that's simply the case anymore. Like Adriana said, new research that was just recently introduced actually in the 1990s shows that emotional intelligence is actually responsible for 80% of the success in our life.
That's high.
Which, 80% is like a huge number, but it makes sense because our emotional intelligence is a predictor of how well we can manage ourselves in society, as well as how well we can manage the relationships in our life. As I said, emotional intelligence, or EQ, is the ability to understand and manage your emotions and the emotions of those around you. So people with a high degree of emotional intelligence, they know what they're feeling, what their emotions mean, how they can regulate their emotions, and how the emotions affect the people around them. I think it's a really important topic because it shows our ability to be able to process and work through our emotions instead of choosing to impulsively act on them, which in the society that we're in, like, I think that it's really common for people to act impulsively or to react impulsively. I think that if all of us like had more self-control, we would like have a better society.
A better world.
So it's important to learn and know how to create time between that initial feeling of the emotion, whether it's anger, sadness, whatever it is, between that emotion and between your response to that emotion, because doing that helps you to be able to sit with the emotion, and not only that, but also be present in the difficult times of your relationships in healthy ways without running at the first sign of conflict. Which this was something that I had to learn a lot over in the last 7 years of my marriage, because in the beginning, I think that I didn't really understand it. Whenever we would have a conflict or a disagreement, I would like retreat into myself and I wouldn't communicate. I think that I would repress my emotions, and that didn't help anything in the long run. Like, it just leads to more conflict. And so just being able to sit, with that emotion and then come together for resolution, I think is like really healthy for a relationship. Like I said, it's a new concept developed in the 90s by American psychologist Daniel Goleman, which I think the fact that it was developed like so late in the 90s is attributing a lot to why we as like millennials or Gen Z as a generation like are not familiar with the concept of emotional intelligence. And not only that, but now as adults, like maybe we don't really understand it or like understand the importance of it.
I think we also like didn't grow up with that being role modeled in the older generation.
So it's very hard to like replicate it, like if you didn't see it.
Yeah. So with that being said, what does a person with a high EQ look like?
So a person with like a high emotional intelligence is like that person that can walk into like a tense environment and like bring like calm or peace to any situation. It's like a person that makes other people feel at ease in conversation. People with high EQ are seen as like charismatic or approachable, not easily offended. But I also think it's important to talk about like the other side of the coin, like what high emotional intelligence does not look like. So some signs of actually low emotional intelligence: you lack empathy, you think others are oversensitive, you don't understand your own emotions, and in turn you can't manage your own emotions, like you react impulsively, like we said. You have difficulty with relationships. You believe that being liked by others is unimportant, which is like not true. Because obviously we live in a world where a lot of us have different characters or like temperaments, so you're gonna clash with people. And it's like important to know how to manage your emotions and how to be able to like manage the relationships around you, which is like what that statistic proved is gonna lead to like 80% of your success in life.
Yeah. Do you have any example like in your own life?
Yes.
Low
I
EQ?
do. Yeah, I do, totally. So I was talking to my sister yesterday, and I have 4 sisters, and I go to them a lot for advice. So I don't know, it's probably the same for you.
Yeah.
And so I was kind of running through today's episode with her, and she's like, okay, well, do you guys like have a real world example that you want to talk about? And I'm like, I do, but now I don't really want to talk about it. But I thought about, like, for me, okay, my first job, I was like, this is such a perfect example. I was 16, and I was like working as a waitress. I got the job at a restaurant. My sister was friends with the owner. And okay, 16, like, we're all, immature, mentally, emotionally. So for me, like, for anybody who works in like the restaurant industry, you know that like it's not easy.
It's hard. It's a hard job.
Yeah, it is. Like people like sometimes aren't nice, and like when you're 16, you take everything personally.
Yeah, it's like all about you.
Yeah, literally. So like it started off great, but just like dealing with like mean people or like clashing with my colleagues or something, I think I lasted like 5 days, and then I just quit. Like I didn't even give my 2 weeks. Like
you're like, you just give up.
That's so unprofessional, like now thinking about it.
I know, but no one, I'm sure, taught you how to.
Yeah, like how to conflict resolve or anything. Like I was just like, okay, this is not working anymore. Like I'm just gonna quit.
You're over it.
Yeah, and then like I remember my sisters made fun of me because I didn't even last a week. But like now thinking about it, like I see obviously with time and like maturing is obviously what goes into having a high emotional intelligence, because you go through experiences and stuff like that. And I'm realizing now, like, you can't live your life like that. Like, if I would have stayed at that level of emotional maturity, I would have been, like, stumped for my life, because you can't go through life like that, just quitting whenever you don't get along with someone or something, because A, I think you miss out on a lot of opportunities doing that, and B, like, you're just robbing yourself of, like, not only success, but also, like, that those times of like conflict are what can strengthen you emotionally.
Yeah, you kind of learn how to grow up.
Yeah. So now I'm like, thank God I'm not. I'm past that stage.
Yeah. So from our research, I'm understanding that there are 5 skills related to emotional intelligence. Do you want to go through them?
Yes, we're going to briefly go through them. So the first one is self-awareness. Like we touched on earlier, it's the skill of being aware of your own emotions and understanding them as they are occurring. I think a concept that we grew up with that's really flawed is labeling emotions as positive or negative. I don't think that that's healthy. I think that we should look at emotions as appropriate or inappropriate. An example that comes to mind is anger. Anger is usually associated with being a negative emotion. But sometimes, depending on the circumstance, it can be a completely reasonable and appropriate emotion. So emotional intelligence is just like allowing us to be able to recognize, for example, anger and understand why the emotion is occurring, which leads into the second skill, which is self-regulation. So now that you are aware of your emotions, you can really hone in on that skill of regulating those emotions, so that, you can know what's appropriate, what's not appropriate for certain situations. And self-control is a very big part of self-regulation. And then leading into the third skill, motivation. People with a high IQ or EQ are intrinsically motivated. They have a thirst for personal development. They are highly driven to succeed and accomplish goals, but this is where the difference lies between someone with high EQ and low EQ. People with a high emotional intelligence, they are inspired to accomplish things because it helps them grow as a person instead of doing it for outside rewards like money, fame, or accolades or anything like that. And then also fourth would be empathy, having a level of empathy towards others and being compassionate is very important in the concept of emotional intelligence. You should have a healthy level of self-interest of yourself, but not be self-centered. So for example, when you're in conversations like with somebody, you can understand where that person is coming from. Even if that exact scenario has not happened to you, you can still draw on your experience to kind of connect with that person. And then you're slow to judge others. And then really lastly, wrapping up these 5 skills is social skills. So somebody with a high EQ has really good social skills and they are good at working in teams. They're aware of others and their needs in like a conversation. They're very good at conflict resolution, which that's something that I think we all could definitely work on.
Yeah, for sure.
They are welcoming in conversation. They use active listening. They have good communication skills. So these are really the 5 skills that kind of like wrap up emotional intelligence as a concept.
Yeah, and after hearing all those skills, I'm realizing that we're severely lacking some of them in immigrant communities.
Yeah.
Just like self-awareness, self-regulation.
Totally.
And I kind of want to talk about that. Like I said earlier, we never had like a role model growing up to see like how that's presented in our day-to-day life. So I think when you were talking about especially the self-control, I thought of my husband, James. I was like, he's the definition of self-control.
Yeah, totally.
Which is obviously awesome. I married the guy. So clearly I'm attracted to good people.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's really good at sitting with his emotions, actually like talking about it, which I think is also
huge for a guy.
Yeah, uncommon for guys, especially
immigrant.
Yeah. So that was obviously really attractive seeing someone doing that. And he's really good at responding instead of reacting. I just remember when we had like problems, I would just look at him and I'm like, are you gonna say anything? And he's like, well, let me think about it. And I'm like, oh, okay, you're
That's
smart.
Like so foreign to
but I
us.
was like, okay. And it made a gun conflict so much easier. We like learned how to fight, not just not to fight. You're gonna end up fighting regardless.
Of course.
So that's like one person I definitely look up to when it comes to having emotional intelligence. He has, I mean, he's not perfect, but he has a lot of these things that I see in him, and I'm happy that I get to kind of learn from him. And
I kind of want to piggyback on what you said. Not that I'm like trying to talk about my husband. We both have great husbands. We're going to brag for a little bit.
Okay. Awesome.
I just think about Finney too, my husband Phineas, because he talks about a lot like how he wasn't like in love with school. Like he's really smart, but he wasn't the type of person to like learning and studying. But I think that like a lot of like the success he has comes from him being such a people person and like seeing how important it is to be able to like manage the relationships in your life. I definitely see that in him. Like that leads to a lot of doors being open, and it's not necessarily like we talked about your academic, level or whatever. So I think that's really important too.
That is super important. So other things we were talking about, just immigrant communities. I feel like, at least for me growing up, our household was not super emotional, as in looking down on emotions every time. Especially as a kid, you cry.
Oh, yeah.
Especially when you're getting punished and disciplined. So we would cry, and then my parents would right away say, like, stop crying. And I don't know if your parents...
Oh, 100%.
To you.
Like, every time I'd get in trouble, like, stop crying. Like, why? Why can't I cry?
And you can't really ask your parents, like, why.
Yeah.
And I remember, like, going to my room, crying but not crying, and just being so confused that like made me just hold my emotions back and realize like, oh, if I cry, that shows that I'm weak, and I'm not weak. So growing up, I remembered, not that I thought I was cool that I had emotions, but when people cried, I would be like, oh, I'm not crying, or like, oh, I'm strong. Like just because someone's mean to me, I'm not gonna be sad about it. Like I have tough skin, and whatever people said didn't affect me, but it did. I just didn't know how to deal with it. And so then I got older and I started, of course, you can't like always hide your emotions. And like you said earlier, talking about positive and negative, every time I was sad, I would just block it. And I'm like, no, I'm not
Repress,
sad.
yep.
Yeah. And I'm like, yes, I am sad. I need to sit with it.
Yeah.
And even when I was in therapy, I realized I don't know how to handle emotions. I'm still learning. Because of the environment we grew up in, it wasn't like good to show any type of emotion other than happiness. They always wanted you to be happy.
Right.
So I thought that was pretty interesting growing up in that community. Even in therapy, there were times where I would like, I guess, be on the brink of crying, and then I would just like change subject or like just not cry. And my therapist is like, "You're in therapy. This is a safe space.
Like, it's normal
you can
to cry."
And I was just like, "No, it's okay. Like, I'd rather not." And she's like, "Well, make sure you're crying like at least in your car or when you're alone." And I'm like, "No, like I don't know."
You don't see the point of it, but it's so important.
It is very beneficial,
Yeah.
and to this day, I'm still learning.
I agree. Yeah, 100%. I'm on the same page as you. Because growing up, same. Like when I'd get in trouble, stop crying. And like when you're younger, you don't realize, but like over time, it's like literally drilled into your brain. So now, as an adult, I'm like, I don't cry. Like that's so weird. Like I don't think that's normal to not be able to like express your emotion like that, because it's such a healthy like outlet to be able to express your emotion, even if you don't have anything to cry about. Like just sometimes when you cry, you like feel like a weight was taken off your shoulders. And I actually had like an experience yesterday with my son that's like interesting because it kind of plays into this. So he's like learning right now how to lose, literally. Like he's very competitive and he like gets very emotional when he loses. So I'm trying to like explain to him like, hey, it's okay, you're not gonna win all the time in life. It's not about winning all the time. Like it's about having fun, you know, spending time with that person, doing your best, because he can't go out into the world thinking that he's gonna win all the time. That's just not gonna happen. So I'm explaining it to him, and then I see him like getting really upset and like holding back tears. And I don't know if it's like because he's a boy or why, but then I just thought about it. I'm like, okay, I saw literally myself as a child, like at 4 years old. Like I like saw myself in him, and I was like, what would I have wanted? Like somebody to tell me. So I'm like, okay, what are you feeling right now?
Like let's talk about it.
I'm
rather
like,
than
are you feeling?
Are
you feeling angry, sad? Helping him to like label that emotion. He's like, I feel mad. I'm like, okay, why do you feel mad? And just walking him through that, and like not only walking him through it, but like helping him to like understand what he's feeling, why he's feeling it, and then giving him like a healthy outlet, like to express that. I'm like, okay, like you can take a deep breath with me, or like you can go upstairs if you want time by yourself. I think that helps like so much. And like because like you said, like we didn't really see that growing up, and like I think it's hard for us as adults, but now I'm realizing like I think a lot of times our parents did that because that was their only option coming here, was like to be happy. Because if they ever, I think, were in tune with their emotions, they would be probably so like upset or depressed, because thinking, okay, I left behind my parents, my siblings, I don't know anybody here, people make fun of me. Like if they were in tune with their emotions, they maybe would not have survived.
They're like in survival mode and just repress their emotions.
So like I'm not like excusing them, I understand, but like now it's like, okay, we're the second generation, and we can't take that forward because it's like really toxic.
So that I was also gonna say, like showing up for the younger generation in a way that our previous generation couldn't for us. Again, we understand why they couldn't, and I'm thankful that we kind of talked about in the last episode that they brought us here to America. They sacrificed their life for us, but now we're here. And I think it's important to teach our generation and also the younger generation that it's okay to feel vulnerable. It's okay to express what you're feeling, to have a safe space where you can express your emotions. And it's okay to not always be grateful and happy. I feel like every time I was sad, my parents were like, why are you sad? I came here.
Right,
it's like, okay, I can be sad and also be grateful at the same time. So that was another thing. Growing up, I realized it's okay to have different emotions at once. I could be dealing with anxiety, but I can also be happy at times and sad at times. So it's more about talking about it and kind of figuring out, okay, what is this emotion, sitting with it and figuring out either like a solution or like what can you do. So I think that's a big thing that I'm very, I guess, want to prioritize with the younger generations, that it's okay to have emotions, men and women.
Especially that totally plays into toxic masculinity. That's one of our episodes that we're gonna have. Excuse me. And it's true, because especially boys. Like I see, okay, like I said, I don't know why my son had that reaction, like to like stifle his tears.
Yeah.
But like maybe, I mean, he's a boy. Maybe that was his natural reaction. But okay, his dad is like a very like emotional, like, and he's comfortable with his emotions. And to me, like that means strength.
Yeah.
Because like you can feel those emotions, not, you know, stifling them. So I think that, like you said, it's really important for us to be able to like show the younger generations like you can have feelings, like it's a safe, you know, space. And another thing that I think the reason why we had like a hard time understanding emotional intelligence was because emotional intelligence is something that's like fluid and it's like constantly evolving in our life, but it really begins in our childhood. So like if we grew up in a home where like, for example, emotional regulation didn't take place, so like if you had one or both parents that would have like angry outbursts, then you as a kid, obviously seeing that, you're not understanding what emotional regulation is supposed to look like. So a lot of times, like, it falls on us too as parents. Like, I need to sit with my emotions. I need to know how to regulate them. And then I don't want this to affect my kid in his adult life. And then also if like our parents didn't offer consistent support, if they didn't encourage us, like we said, to express emotions, or if they punished us for showing feelings, you know, that leads to it. So just understanding that it's okay to be kind of like dealing with this and to just kind of understand that we have steps that we can take, but we just have to recognize that
there's a solution.
Yeah, for sure. There's a solution.
Yeah. When you brought up like, again, your childhood, like me and a few sisters are more like tough and like tough love and don't cry. And then
Me and all of my sisters are like this. Yeah,
well,
5 out of 5.
I have a few sisters. That's funny that you guys are all the same. I have a few sisters that, again, growing up, it's sad, but we literally grew up and being like, you guys are so sensitive, you guys are so dramatic. And just because they were more in tune with their emotions, which is actually healthier. And me and my sisters that were more like tough would always be like, you guys are so sensitive, stop crying, you guys are so dramatic. But I learned that because when my sisters were crying at us, my dad would say the same thing, like, stop being dramatic or like stop crying. So I realized now growing up, and when I have kids, I like need to step back and realize like, okay, it is up to the parent and what's like around us or even our community to be aware and not put that on the next generation, because it'll never end. So we definitely need to unlearn a lot of things that we're taught. And honestly, I'm excited that we get to be more aware and that we're all on the same page, and we can only get better.
For sure.
So with that being said, what can we do to increase EQ?
So I'm going to give you guys an acronym to kind of remember, and it's RULE, RULE. So the first thing you want to do is recognize your emotions. And like you said, sit with your emotions. So this is something that I've started practicing like recently. Like when I feel something and it triggers something, I like let myself feel that. Like I'm like, okay, right now, like I'm angry. And then really going to the next one, understanding what causes that emotion. So then I try to go back in time and be like, okay, why did this event trigger this response from me? Like what has this triggered maybe from my childhood or from my past? And then third, labeling them. So like label what you're feeling. So like I'm feeling angry, I'm feeling disappointed, whatever it may be. And then lastly, expressing that to somebody and like verbalizing it for me helps a lot. So like I do that a lot with Finney, with my husband. Like at the end of the day, I'll be like, hey, I felt like angry today because of this, and like it reminded me of this. So just like verbalizing that and like putting that out, I think helps to get it out of your mind, because keeping it in your mind is like not gonna help you. It's just you're just gonna ruminate over it. And talking about it with somebody else also gives you like a different insight and perspective. And most importantly, it starts that process of self-awareness. And like, okay, I feel like this, then that can lead to, like I said, regulating your emotions, and it's a good cycle to have.
Yeah, I love that. So I have a few things that I want to kind of jump on that. I feel like expressing them is huge. Being aware of how you feel, it actually makes you start being aware of how other people feel.
Yeah, that's a great point.
When I got, I guess, better and more in tune with my emotions, I would hang out with people or be at work and see how someone was acting. And then I would kind of think about it too. Like, oh, they're upset. Why would they be upset? Did something happen? And then I'm more compassionate towards them and I can talk to them rather than back then if someone was upset, I would just be like, okay, they're pissed off, and kind of go on with my day. So I feel like that definitely helped me be more aware and be more compassionate, ask them like, hey, is everything okay?
That's a great point.
Yeah. And then another thing, more of like recognizing your emotions. Again, me being in therapy, my therapist gave me literally a list of like 100 emotions. And I was like, I didn't know there was so many
existed.
Yeah, and it was cool because there was one thing that said like, okay, like angry. And then the more I looked into it, I was like, okay, that could mean frustrated. You could be angry, sad. You could be upset. You could be disappointed. There's so many different things rather than just saying like, I'm angry. It's like, okay, when you start diving deep of like why that made you angry, you realize like, okay, I was actually frustrated, not angry. And since I'm frustrated, I could do this. So next time, if it happens again, I know how to deal with my emotions.
Just basically correcting, certain patterns.
And
that's a good
hard.
point.
Also,
It's hard because you have to dig a lot.
Yeah, I feel like talking about things, it sounds nice until you're put in that scenario and you realize like, okay, this is my time to actually like sit back and not react on all these emotions. So
that's a good point that you brought up, that it's hard because it is difficult.
It is,
it's much easier to repress, which is like I said, maybe why our parents, I think, repressed a lot, because they could not probably handle things emotionally because they had to survive, like we said, in like a new country. But repressing it just leads to like, even physically, your body will respond at one point. Like you will have PTSD or something, you will respond physically. If you don't deal with the emotion in that moment, you're only making it worse and the healing process like longer on yourself.
And it's sad that it turns into physical. Even with anxiety, it could be more mental, but then it ends up being panic attacks. And a lot of people also, I think in our generation, we're more aware of like anxiety and depression. But I know the older generation, like I have someone in the family who is technically having a panic attack. They don't know that. They think, oh my God, I think I'm having a heart attack. My heart is racing. Yeah, they're feeling all these physical symptoms, thinking like something physical is wrong with me. And it's like, no, that's actually like anxiety, and it's coming from your like, clearly something happened, either trauma or something in their past happened. You're not dealing with it. So now you're anxious, and now it's going to be a panic attack, or you're going to get sick from something. So it's seeing the long-term effects is really sad. And I hope that we start kind of ending that. It's kind of crazy like how powerful the mind is. Like it really does all start from the mind. And also like I like how you mentioned that there are so many emotions, because and you can be feeling multiple emotions at once, because I think we're like so multifaceted as human beings, but like we don't recognize that. Like we kind of put ourselves in a box, and then you know we don't know how to deal with what or cope with what our mind is feeling, and then like you said, it turns out into like physical side effects. So one quote that I kind of want to read that I found that I think just really sums up this episode really well. Between stimulus and response there is a space, and in that space lies our freedom and our power to choose our response. And then in that response that we choose lies our growth and freedom. I love that. So yeah, I think that's just a really great way to wrap up the episode, because knowing that development can take place emotionally in all of us, and all you have to do is just begin that journey, and kind of it's baby steps. Put in the hard work, but it's so worth it in the end. It is worth it. Cool. Well, with that being said, we're again so thankful that you came all the way here and listened to us. And if you liked today's episode, please share it. Subscribe to our Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or on YouTube. And I think all of that is in the link tree in our Instagram.
Yes.
And yeah, we'll see you back next Tuesday.